Good afternoon, students. Thank you for watching this video. I decided to record myself, my presentation, because of the internet constraints I'm facing at the moment. You're all aware with that already, right? I think we will have the opportunity to exchange ideas, to interact by means of this platform. It was the potential solution I came up with. And I guess, well, it's going to favor the dynamics of the final presentation of the course properly. Of course, we will meet up later individually for taking care of your queries and questions with regard to the final observation task. But we will reach agreement with the schedules, etc. Okay, this is the final one for covering the content of the course. We're gonna take care of pragmatics just a bit, the basic concepts, and language policy and planning, which is Unit 5. And with that said, we're gonna be closing and covering the most relevant content of the program of the course. You know, working online is different. Consequently, we try to pick bits and pieces of the program so that you can be properly trained. I'm gonna start sharing my presentation with you all, okay? And at the end of the presentation, you will be able to ask your questions and to comment here in the same platform. I think that's gonna be the way for interacting to keep on exchanging ideas, okay? Well, let's start with pragmatics. Here you have pragmatics is a subfield of linguistics. You have it there. And semiotics that studies how context contributes to meaning. Pragmatics encompasses act theory, conversational implicature, talking interaction, and other approaches to language behavior, and sociology, linguistics, philosophy, and anthropology. Here you have the sequence of what I'm trying to get at. You have the field of linguistics, the subfield of semiotics. We have a term which is very specific and what the scholars call speech arts. The term was coined in the 1950s. We're going to explore that in detail in the following slides to refer to something that we have already explored, something we are familiar with, such as politeness, solidarity, cooperation, turn taking. Specific contexts and contextual cues that provide with meaning. So with pragmatics, we are dealing with meaning in use or meanings in use because pragmatics refers to how words are used in a practical sense. For instance, words that attempt to explain abstract concepts such as freedom or beauty. They have no meaning in and of themselves, but a context shapes their meanings. To me, beauty might mean something totally relative, subjective, but when it comes to a conversation, or even love, when it comes to conversation, we hear the word cognitively analyzed by ourselves, but then it's placed in a specific context with specific person or people, and the meaning is shaped by means of that situational phenomena. Okay, a phenomenon. So instead, someone who looks at pragmatics would attempt to understand how they are being used in the context, in the practical sense. And the fundamental question for pragmatics would be, what do people do with language? How do they use it? What for? when, in which manner, etc. Let's continue, okay? Well, pragmatics evolve, such as social linguistics did, and all the field of linguistics and applied linguistics did. It shifted from language to communication. And remember that we have already explored fundamental concepts of language dimensions with Saussure, and we also explore the definition of communication, communicative competence, etc. Well, regarding this evolution of the field, pragmatics also turned from language to communication in order to well, have a different view of the similarities with almost all the existing definitions of this course had already been identified and discussed. And the outcome of this integrative process was that this course became the object of inquiry in most branches of pragmatics. Connections with social linguistics, however, remained superficial. There is no consensus. But I think it's tangible, it's visible. The relationship between social linguistics and discourse analysis, you have already taken your courses, is there. I mean, there are commonalities, they encounter points in common for analyzing the context. Okay. In our case, with social linguistics, cultural features, contextual cues, conversation analysis, and of course, this is valuable for both fields. So, in summary, pragmatics shift from language to communication as currently understood, or from Saussure's Lang to Parole, okay, the system, where we can find issues of interaction, contextualization, convention, solidarity, politeness, complementing, saving phase, positive phase, negative phase, conversation analysis, turn taking, and what we have already explored with the previous task of having a natural conversation and identifying those contextual cues that might impact meanings and interaction itself. Well, as I told you in the first slide, speech ads was coined to refer to different kinds of meanings, okay? Performance, such as asking, which is totally different than ordering or demanding, and talking was something different from shouting, quarreling, or arguing. So meanings vary, and Austin and Searle highlighted those differences. They shed light on the fact that there was a level of meaning in language that was lying in the activity of using language in specific ways, not merely in the structure of sentences. So it moved from language to communication. And Grice in 1975 coined another term, implicature, to describe the process where interlocutors can rationally infer specific meanings from an utterance rather than a sentence. Pragmatics goes over utterances. Thus, statements such as it's already 7 can be understood not as a declarative statement, but rather as an indirect question. And the question would be, when will dinner be ready? And so lead to an answer such as, the potatoes are on the fire. Such inferences are the retrieval of implicit, not encoded meanings in particular utterances, and our cultural and social skills enable us to make such inferences with reasonable accuracy. They are evidence, according to the scholars, of the rational nature of human behavior in conversational practices. If it is human behavior and it's natural, then we can also think of what we explored at the beginning with the language acquisition device. But now we're not talking about grammar, structure, and linguistic competence as Chomsky would refer to, but we're talking about the communicative competence umbrella provided by Canale and Swain, remember in the previous lesson. Well, this was just an example. Let's go for the next. Okay, prepositions cooperation. For these speech ads, we can find talk and action. In speaking to one another, we make use of sentences. But to be more precise in this field, we make use of utterances. We can attempt to classify the utterances in any one of a variety of ways. We can try out to classify them by grammatical structure or by a means of numbers of dimensions, such as complexity or passive of a statement or questions, request, etc. Various combinations. We have even tried to work out a semantic or logical structure for each utterance. However, a classification in terms of what sentences do, okay, such as take a functional approach that goes beyond consideration of such functions as stating, questioning, requesting, exclaiming, but that explore the nature of meaning and the use in particular cases, would question meaning itself. What do utterances do and mean? And one example could be what philosophers have studied and argued with regard to imperative sentences. Imperatives are usually taught in our classrooms by means of following patterns, such as verb at the beginning in infinitive form, verb infinitive, simple form, plus a verb, a complement, right? This is usually employed for commands, sometimes instructions, okay? However, yeah, we might find different meanings which are implied in a functional approach that we hardly ever consider. I'll give you an example. A child who doesn't want to eat, and you come up with an imperative sentence and you say, eat your soup. Okay, that's an imperative, right? But what happens if the child answers, why do I need to eat my soup? I'm not hungry. And you say, eat your soup if you want to go out and play with your friends. Or eat your soup if you want to be strong. Or eat your soup if you don't want to get ill. Otherwise, you will get sick. But the child continues argumenting and saying, but I don't want to go out and I don't want to play now. I don't want to be strong. And I'm not sure whether I'm going to get ill or not. And I don't care. In that moment, the imperative sentence is broken. Okay, it's not an imperative anymore, but a hypothesis, because you are conditioning the imperative, the command, if. Okay, so what happens then? Well, you need to use the imperative sentence for it to become categorical. That's what philosophers have discussed. Well, Immanuel Kant, right? You could say, eat your soup. Why do I need to eat my soup? Eat your soup because that's what all people do in order to survive. We need to eat food. We need to be fed. That way, you're going to be surviving. Do you think everybody can survive without food? Do you think everybody can do it and stay healthy? Analyze it, okay? Reflect on that. Come out with your own conclusions. You're not conditioned, okay? It's just like triggering what you have inside yourself in order to discriminate what is doable, okay? It's not a dichotomy between right or wrong, but you're using the imperative in a different manner, okay, to raise awareness, to decide by yourself, to face the consequences of your acts, of your performance, of your decisions. And you're not conditioning. That's an imperative sentence. Okay, it's categorical in that manner. So you can see that a particular considerations functions might vary, and that is the field of study, the situation of the talk, the situation of the conversation, the context of the action. Now, there is this a subfield of speech arts cooperation. The cooperative principle refers to major conversational contribution such as is required at the stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which you're engaged. Grice in 1975 listed four maxims that follow from the cooperative principle: quality, quantity, relation, and manner. The maxim of quantity requires you to make your contribution as informative as it is required. The maxim of quality requires you not to say what you believe to be false or that for which you lack adequate evidence. Relation is the simple injunction: be relevant. Manner requires you to avoid obscurity of expression and ambiguity, and to be brief and orderly. This principle and these maxims characterize ideal exchanges. Such exchanges would also observe certain other principles too, such as be polite, saving face, positive or negative, which is a topic we were supposed to explore. But I guess you have already done that in your previous courses with discourse analysis or even with professional development when it comes to communities of practice. So I'm not that worried about it. Now that we're talking about what we have covered in different courses, and in this course, we can reach agreement and state that context plays a paramount role in language, okay, and in language learning specifically. The context is taken into consideration for meaning, okay, for practice, for teaching, and for planning. The context and the situation, which is basically interweaving in conversations, might change meaning. They're concrete, they're particular, specific. What about the context of teaching? Well, you need to identify the different kinds of learners, the capital culture they bring with them, the elements around teaching, such as the philosophy of the school, the curriculum, the syllabus, the implementation, the activities, the characteristics, etc. Everything you have already explored in your previous courses and in this one are going to be useful for determining the context of teaching. Oh, but that's also, sorry. And what about context for educational planning? Well, for educational planning, we have the following figure that summarizes the elements around the context for planning. One of them is the geographic, where we can find territories, variations of the language, varieties, and what we explore in the course with the social cultural approach with social linguistics. You have the historical and political acts, which has to do with language policies and our background as society. The educational one, which is about the specific language policies for education, for schooling, whether, well, we're going to figure out the kinds of planning. Economic and technological, something we had already discussed in one of your first tasks in the course with regard to the suitability of English as a lingua franca for the educational system in Mexico. Can you remember that? We actually had a very lively and interesting discussion with regard to the feasibility of teaching English as a lingua franca in your essays. You can go back to your discussion and in an attempt to remember and recall what we exchanged there. You there inside the umbrella of the context for planning might find national and international settings, social needs, problems, social problems, and factors and elements that might take care of those problems. Home environment and neighborhood, school environment, and in the middle, language teaching, which is the place where we're gonna try to do something about planning as apply linguists. Sorry for that. Let's go over language policy and planning. Okay. According to Cooper, um, language policy and planning is a deliberate attempt to influence the behavior of others with respect to the acquisition, structure, or functional allocation of the language code, okay, or codes. It's about language decisions, language decision makers, stakeholders, authorities. Robin makes a useful distinction between language policy and language planning, in which policy is the legal or statutory measures intended to regulate language use, and planning is the practical implementation of these policies, the associated goals, strategies, and means of assessing progress and outcomes. So we have there the definition of both. Now we have different language planning orientations. Those language orientations refer to the idea that language planning efforts of all types can be characterized as approaching language from one or more of three primary stances. Language as a problem, language as right, language as resource, and those orientations are related to minority languages, language as problem, okay, language as right, regulations, and has to do with government and legislators, language as resource, the dominant languages which are supposed to be learned, languages of wider communication, which is another term for lingua francas, right? Languages as problem are minority languages. The conflicts in orientation can explain why language policy and plans are so difficult to implement. Okay, so those might be the orientations that we need to set first and understand for their potential success. All people make numerous decisions involving language use in their daily lives. We do too. However, much of our use of everyday language takes place so quickly as to seem instantaneous, meaning that many choices about how we use language are not made consciously and are not really decisions at all, but we keep up with the rhythm. Well, regarding language planning orientations, we can establish the approach, okay, the paradigm, the overview for working with the stakeholders who sometimes are not familiar with language needs. So that's our role, okay, the collaborative cooperation. Now, language policies. We have different kinds of language planning. We have corpus planning that refers to language planning that attempts to modify in some way the code of a given variety. Okay. This is usually implemented. Well, we have a couple of examples in Wales, okay, or in African countries, where for school purposes, they tried to modify dialects or the code. Okay. We also have status planning that refers to efforts to increase or decrease the value, the prestige of a particular language or variety. Okay. Um, so it could be for minority or dominant languages. We also have acquisition planning that involves direct instruction, independent language study, and other efforts to motivate people to acquire or learn a particular language or variety, which is basically familiar with our context. You have language in education planning that refers to instances of language planning that take place within the domain of education and schooling. And finally, critical language planning that involves questioning the social causes and ramifications of language plans and policies and their implementations in line with the critical applied linguistics. Language planning from a critical perspective means asking for reasons, asking why, and in whose interest decisions about languages are made. So we have these different kinds of planning. They can be implicit or explicit, and your task is gonna be part of the discrimination of these different kinds of planning, and you will have the possibility of reading Varda's paper on general linguistics in the chapter of Pragmatics and Politeness from page 260 to page 280. I will share with you the text. I'm gonna upload it to the task you will need to carry out. Okay. Well, finally, well, roles for applied linguists, okay, or for us teachers. One of the primary roles applied linguists can play in the development and evaluation of language policies and planning efforts is to assist the non-linguists who are involved in understanding basic issues of first and second language acquisition. Okay, that's a role. Applied linguists can select and develop books and other pedagogical materials for learning and teaching to follow language policies or resist them. And as teachers, you might be the applied linguist, or you might be an applied linguist collaborating with a team of teachers to develop a textbook or a curriculum. Okay. And of course, you will have to develop certain skills regarding literacy or multimedia, etc., or elements that might be helpful for making up your appropriate competence to implement and back up what you want to do. Finally, language planning is also practiced in the publishing industry, another community of practice, where the authors, editors, or translators are involved in the issue of which languages and varieties to work in. So this is also something to consider, to bear in mind for roles in the classroom, for our professional development, and the impact of publishing and working with with language. These are the references. Well, I'm gonna place the appropriate text in the task for you to continue reading. Okay. And now what I would like to do is to share my screen to go to the final task. Hold on, this is the one. I'm gonna share this with you. Okay. If you go to the activities section, you will be able, to the Eminos platform, you will be able to check here, number 5, language policy and planning. You click it, okay. I'm missing the text here. I forgot to attach the text, so it's gonna be here. You have a brief description of the task and the instructions of the activity. Reflect on the following policies and planning related questions and answer the questions by designing a presentation with the format that you wish to use. Upload the presentation or the link of your presentation here, okay, PDF or link or PowerPoint or Canva presentation, Prezi, you decide. What are the language policies of Mexico in a succinct manner? Okay. Does the national constitution stipulate an official or national language or languages? Okay. That's your brief investigation. What legislation or public policy guides language choices in the domains of education here in Mexico? Because that's a place where you're going, where you work and you will keep on working, perhaps. If you have studied or thought abroad, how do the language policies of your host country compare to those of Mexico? Or in case of Hakim's, if you're more familiar with your home country, go ahead. Okay. How are the linguistic needs of minorities addressed? Okay, for discussion. And what differences do you observe between policy and everyday practice? Which is something that you can take from the papers that you wrote previously. Okay. The date for delivery, well, you have it here, is May 28th, before 3 in the afternoon. So you have for about 3 weeks. You have time, take your time. If you have any question, you can let me know. Okay, let me go back. This is gonna be a very easy task. Okay, it's 5%, by the way, and I want to show you something here. This is our Excel sheet where we check the progress of each of you guys. It's loading, hold on. Okay, sorry, but I'm dealing with my internet problems as usual. Well, thank you for your patience. You can text me, you can send me an email in order to keep in touch. Oh, this is not the one. Shoot. This is the one. Loading. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, here you have, okay. Um, well, we are missing the interaction task, transcript the natural conversation that you are about to prepare and identify the linguistic elements and contextual cues required. Well, we attended a presentation today that included both pragmatics and language policy and planning. And you will have a presentation which is 5%, which gives a total of 30% and 70% of your final task, which is elaborated and it needs to be articulate. But you still have for about 3 weeks or so in order to accomplish successfully this activity and the goals, cover the goals. Okay, so you have May 14th, May 21st, May 28th, and the first week of June. Well, to deliver the final observation, I think we have until a, let's check. Oh, sorry, let's corroborate this. My God. Yeah. Final analysis of interaction, May 31st. It's Monday. Okay, so you have plenty of time. And I'm gonna be recording some videos for the people who require and ask for advice regarding your research topics and how you could work with something related to your research topic so that it could be linked. Okay. Um, of course, I'm gonna share the videos for everybody. Okay, those are gonna be examples of what you can do, but that can be useful for everyone. Um, what you have here, the rationale of the analysis of this interaction and conversation, and the instructions that you need to follow. Read them carefully, take your time. Okay, I'm gonna be recording some videos for Bertelli's format. I'm gonna tell you one way to do it. I have an example. I'm gonna give you examples of reflective notes and specifically how to link your topic with a potential one, with a potential topic of the course. If it is not possible, don't worry. I mean, you should be able to do it once we have covered all the topics of the course. But if you can't, it's not a problem. You don't need to link it. Okay. It was going to be beneficial. That was my point. Okay. Don't get me wrong, because you could kill two birds with a single stone. But if not, remember, you design a brief lesson plan for using Kahoot, remember, for varieties of language and how to raise awareness. You could work with that and you could focus on that. And of course, that's going to be part of our field. And we have to analyze how they react and how they interact with regard to varieties of language. Remember the lesson plan that you design with regard to the use of a pronouns that could work. You know, of course, that could work for the purposes of the class. Yeah. But I mean, you have plenty of options, you know, regarding language and culture features, which turn taking, which pitch, intonation, and you could use those elements to focus your observation on such factors and how they impact the teaching and learning processes. You just come up with a couple of categories, you explain it in a succinct manner, and you show knowledge of the content that we have explored. And who knows, perhaps what you have could be useful for writing a chapter of a book or a presentation in a conference. We could work it out and it would be beneficial for you for your master's degree and for your professional development and for uh, your everyday activities. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop sharing this and I'm gonna stop this video. Okay, we will keep in touch, of course. I will send you an email, and if you have any question, please let me know. Thank you very much for your time and have a lovely week.